Since the American comic book form originated in 1933, comic books have been a subject of much interest. Controversial, engaging, and divisive at times, the medium has permeated popular culture. Comic books have the power to influence our imaginations, our culture, and our art. And with that in mind, some are using comic books to influence our brains, as tools for education.
I have, for a long time, I've incorporated comics. My background was English, so I taught English courses and I taught literature courses, and my first time teaching a comic book was in a literature course. I taught Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns in an American literature course. So when we added Core 202 to the curriculum with that ethical reasoning component, it was only like a natural progression for me to do something with comic books and superheroes, and that's something that I've always loved.
But when I was putting together my English 102 class, which would now be the Core 102 class, I was trying to think of what text I would be using for textual analysis. And I was burned out on literature at that point. I had been, the semester I was designing everything, I had 2 or 3 graduate level literature classes, and I was done. I was an English major for the writing, not for the literature, and I had it with the literature at that point. And I was trying to think about what I would work in, and there were 2 graphic novels that would fit well for that I narrowed it down to. One was Kingdom Come, which was a DC. The art is spectacular, beautiful, but there would also be a lot more backstory involved in that because you're dealing with established characters: Superman, Batman, the entire Justice League, and then all of their kids. So it would be a massive undertaking to actually deal with that. When I chose Watchmen.
What happened to the American dream? What happened to the American dream? It came true. You're looking at it.
Watchmen is a commentary on society, but it's also a commentary on the comic book medium and comic book industry. One of the underlying questions could be, isn't it absurd that people would dress up in tights and go and try and save people and stop crime? But Watchmen is something that every student that I've had is able to pull something out of.
So what we know from research is that comics actually are a wonderful gateway to developing literacy of all sorts. So there is empirical evidence that shows that children are more likely to want to learn to read if there are pictures involved with the reading lessons. We know that second language acquisition is facilitated by having comics as a part of the instructional diet. We know that comics are more effective in helping people retain information than text alone. So there are a lot of different ways in which people have gone about studying the effects of comics and concluded consistently that comics actually help with learning and understanding rather than hurt or detract or impede people's ability to grow and understand things through that form of communication.
Despite the strong evidence that comic books have a place in the world of academia, the reception has been mostly lukewarm, and most people are divided on the issue.
So comics are still laboring under a 60-plus year stigma that really started in the 1950s when they were attacked as a scapegoat for many social ills associated with juvenile delinquency. And the industry has never really fully recovered from that stigma because it's been more widely popularized than the contents of the medium itself. And so for those of us who are interested in comics, it's a real uphill battle to convince people there's merit to these particular forms of communication when there's a much wider societal stigma that is brought to bear anytime you mention the word comics or try to bring them up as something that is serious and worthy of scholarly inquisition or endeavor.
Comic books in classrooms, I guess it could work.
I guess it depends on the class. I took a lot of science classes, so it would be a little bit different. But I think from the psychology classes, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely do think that would be good because, a lot of people, that's what they like in their free time. So if it's associated with schoolwork, then they may be more inclined to do better in class, maybe.
So, comics started off as a popular form of entertainment. There's no two ways around it. They were created to sell magazines and newspapers and were a big draw, particularly for early newspapers, to bring in audiences who were semi-literate and could enjoy the pictures even if they didn't understand the words that went around the rest of the copy in a newspaper. When comic books came along, they were entirely created as a commodity to be sold. They were not necessarily being created as artifacts of art and culture. They were popular entertainment. But like other forms of popular entertainment, what eventually happened is that people who got very good at it started saying things that actually mattered within it. And not that entertainment doesn't matter, but you could delve into more expressive, socially important content using comics just like you could with theater, with film, with dime store novels. I mean, you think of the medium and you think, okay, something like television is largely commercial fodder. It's put out there for the masses. But every once in a while you get something like a Breaking Bad that sort of goes beyond being just a commercial commodity and actually says something of substance to the society in which it's being presented. And comics can do that too.
Comics are a wonderful way of explaining things. Just Will Eisner for years went away from the Spirit, and before he sort of retired and started focusing on sort of these passion projects, what he did for about 20 or 30 years was he did educational pamphlets for the military. And he did them as comics. So they're a great instructional tool. I wish that they had had a comic books for algebra, when I was growing up. I would have learned it so much better. They're great instructional tools.
I would say over the past 20 years, since I've been a growing thing as far as an educational experience. My first knowledge of it was parents and some elementary school educators using them with problem children. They were having problems with wanting to read and so on, using them as a medium to get them involved, to get them interested in reading in English.
And I think a lot of it is people see the stuff that's the most popular stuff, and they don't see the stuff that's more critically acclaimed. They don't tend to see the things like Watchmen. They don't see things like Mouse.
I think as time goes by and you get younger people as the tenured professors and so on who can make decisions on what their curriculum is going to be, and or directors and heads of departments that are going to be younger, they're going to be more open to a differing vision and a differing use. Those will change to a point.
While comic books are still trying to find their place in education and achieving the respect that they deserve as literary works of art, they are being used in the classroom now more than ever. And it's safe to say that the future looks bright.